Good morning, everybody. Well, nice and sunny, but we're back to cool weather again. It is that time of year, and we've been seeing some activity here in the pen. And I thought I'd take a minute and kind of explain that to you a little bit, because sometimes when you're trying to figure out if everybody's getting bred or not, sometimes it's not too obvious, but there are a few signs you can look at and see. And Stu here is going to be a prime example of that. Stu, I do believe, is a spend the night kind of guy. I think he is a spend the night kind of guy. When first day we put him in, minute one, and put Stu in, and he found Dub right here, right off the bat. Now, he spent that day and maybe part of the other. Anytime you find him out here laying down, Stu was laying right there by Dub. About a day or so later, next thing you know, Stu's by himself. He always lays by himself. But a few days later, I happened to see him laying next to Billy Joe back over there. And 2 or 3 times the same day, I saw them laying together, and then they weren't. A couple days later, B over in the back, same thing. Laying together, 2 or 3 times I'd see them during the day laying together, and then the next day they weren't. And finally we got to Tammy, the white one he's standing next to now. That was just about 2 days ago. Same procedure there. After a day or so, then he wasn't. Now the difference is, I saw Dub get bred, I saw Tammy get bred. I didn't see the other 2 get bred. I never saw that. But I saw him spending time with them. So what I do in that situation is I still mark it down. I don't mark it as being bred. I mark it down and let's keep an eye on it. So I know what days he spent with them. 17 days later, we're gonna see if he's back. Did he breed them? If I see him any other time between now and then. But mark anything you find that's a little bit unusual, mark it down. Keep track of it. Now, Stony over here, on the far side, Stony does things just a little bit differently. Stony's more of an attitude of, well, I'd like to spend the night, but I can't. And that's because he figures the waitress was winking at him when he left, and he needs to get back just in case and check that out. Yeah, Stony's moving on real fast. He does one, and he moves on. But I hate to say it, but in the sheep world, that really isn't the worst thing in the world. Because let's remember, we're here, we want to get everybody bred, and you can have a situation where a ram spends too much time with one and he misses another one. So you can have that. Stony, that's not going to happen to Stony. I'll guarantee you. Stony's not going to have that problem. If Stony moves on real fast, he moves on quicker than Stu does. But hey, as long as everybody gets bred last year, everybody got bred last year from Stony and Stu. So as long as that happens again this year, that's all that counts. Now, on the other hand, over on the young pen here, Lomax, he was spending a little time with the one white ewe lamb yesterday. But it's kind of like a couple kids that aren't too sure what they're doing, because he spent most of his time with Greystone. So whenever she came up and kind of come up to him, he thought she wanted to butt heads. So he's backing up and getting ready to butt heads with her. And she's going, no, that's not what I got in mind. So whether they figure it out this time around, they may not figure it out till the next time around. But last year, everybody was young last year, first timers. They all got everybody bred. So I guess that's all that counts as long as it gets done. It is kind of nice sometimes, though, if you got a young ram like that, if you can put a little more experienced ewe that knows what they're doing. But we get what we get and we do what we're doing. One other thing I want to we're getting into fall. So we're getting into, maybe you've had sheep out on pasture all the time, and now you're going to be bringing them in for feeding them, and you're going to have cold weather, water tank, stuff like that. So I thought I had a couple things I wanted to go over there, show you a couple things that I do, just maybe give you an idea for yourself. And the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to start with a hay feeder. We're going to come over here, and there's what I've been using for a hay feeder. Now, that is Normally you buy that at Tractor Supply. It's the cradle. It's got the aluminum cradle that sits up off the ground. I put it on the ground. Main reason is, well, it's high, they're gonna jump in it anyway. Plus, if I'm feeding yet early in the spring and I got lambs, the lambs can get in there and start eating too. So I want it down low. But one thing I want you to notice, I got some hay on the ground. I have not cleaned any hay up here for as long as they've been in here. I got some hay on the ground, but we're gonna go over and I want to show you this other feeder and kind of show you the difference in a second. Now, a lot of times with the sheep, at least with rams around, this is not the kind of feeder you'd like to deal with. They can get horns caught in and stuff. I figure he's little yet, he doesn't have the big horns. I think once you get really big, they're curving around, doing that second curl and the points are sticking out more, you can have a problem catching in. But more importantly, look at all the hay on the ground. Look at the waste. Look at all the waste in here from using this style of feeder. So they're gonna stick with this just a little bit longer. And I'm probably gonna take here, in the next few days, I'm gonna start. I've been feeding them grass hay. I'm about to start on alfalfa. So the grass is about done. Now, I don't make an abrupt change there. What I'm gonna do is probably for the next 3 or 4 days, I will feed them grass with alfalfa. And each day they're gonna get a little more alfalfa until probably 4 or 5 days from now, they'll be strictly alfalfa. And when I do that, it'll be easier to feed these guys out of this round bale I have in here. I'll probably set something up in here. I still got the creep feeder gate. I'll move that out of the way. I'll set something against the wall and I'll probably start feeding them hay in some kind of a trough there. And then I'll get this out of here because this just wastes too much hay. I can clean that up, get it cleaned up here before winter hits. But you see a lot of these feeders and they do work. I mean, they work good, but man, I'll tell you, they waste a lot of feed. There's a lot of hay goes to waste. I noticed that before when I'd used this in the past, so I've started using the other ones. And yeah, that seems to work pretty good. Let me show you, I got one other thing I did that I kind of built myself to make it easier to feed the hay in that same kind of a trough over there. Now, one thing I was able to do, as you can see, I've got a lot of old corral panels like this. They kind of get beat up over the years. We had horses, so had a lot of these and they got beat up over the years. Let me hang this up. There we go, show you what oops. I'll get you straight here, hang on. Anyway, what I did, I had this one that was really beat up pretty bad. I got the hay trough on the other side. This one was beat up, but the bottom one was good. So what I ended up doing, and for now, I just got the chains because I can't decide what I want to do. So this is what I'm using for today. But basically it's designed so I can just open it up, put my hay in, feed them the hay. You know, if you didn't put hay this way, you could even put your grain down there, open it up, and you could easily reach the grain. Otherwise, you're trying to pour over the side of the fence if you don't want to go in. This happens to be a hog gate or something from many years ago, but you could use, you know, here's a piece of goat and sheep fence. You could use that, a cattle panel, a hog panel. You don't really need the pipe around the edge. This just happened to have it, but anything, close that up. As far as the bottom concerned, hang on, let me get the camera. As far as the bottom is concerned, just hose clamps. I've got about 4 or 5 hose clamps along the bottom. They hold the bottom up and allow that to pivot. But for me, I had a corral panel, I'm throwing hay over the top, and every time the wind's blowing that way, I got half it back on top of me, and I said, I gotta stop that. I don't wanna do that anymore. So there's my invention, and that seemed to work pretty good for me. Easy to feed them. And again, we're talking about using this. Look at the ground in here. What do you think, Sony? Look at the ground. There's some hay, but there's not a lot of hay in there. Again, I just like those. They're a lot neater, a lot cleaner than the other side. You don't waste nearly as much hay. All right, and as far as attachment, like I said, I've used these chains. It holds, but someday if I come up with a better idea for that, I don't know. One last thing, let's come over here. And you can see my grass bale is just about gone. So today I'm going to move that out of the way. I'll set a round bale of alfalfa in here. And then, as I said, while I've got that going, I'll mix half and half that. And then, of course, some of that's got to go up the other ones too. Let's talk water, because we're getting that time of year. And there it is, just a plastic bucket. You like that one? That's just Tractor Supply. It's like 17 gallons. And that works very well for me. I like the size of that because it's not too big yet too small. I do use a bigger water type tub over there, but it's only because it's got to be big enough that I split it in half and use it for 2 pens. So I don't think that's quite big enough to split in half, because especially with rams and horns, they might not be able to get into it as well. But here's the key for me. There's a heater. You can see an old one here. These are, a lot of times they just call them bucket chasers, chilled chasers, bucket heaters, whatever. The key is those are only usually about 250 watts. And if you'll look at most of the tank heaters you see, I'm gonna hang you guys up here quick. I don't have to hold on to you while I'm talking. Most of the tank heaters you find, the big floaters and stuff, are like 1,000 or 1,500 watts, and this is 250 watts. You know, I can run 4 of these for the same cost as running 1,000. And this, in that, will have 20 below zero. It didn't freeze up. 20 below zero, I might have had a 1/2 inch ice I had to break on top. But usually down to 0, no problem. Now the one I have up there is twice as big of a tank. It still has one of these in it. It still works. Now that one's undercover. It's out of the wind, so that helps it a little. But for like this pen right here, the tank just sits outside. And that down to 0 will have no problem keeping it thawed out. So with the cost of electricity nowadays, and everything's getting higher priced, again, one of these will cost you the same amount of money for the heater, but you can run 3 or 4 of these for the same amount of electricity you run one of the other ones. Thought I'd bring that up because winter's coming. Something I talked about a year ago, but I thought something to talk about again today. What I do there, maybe save a little money on electricity there. On the feeders, again, you hate wasting a lot of hay. Hay has gotten really high priced, so you don't want to waste any more than you have to. And to me, you know, a feeder like that is just wasting way too much hay. It's going to be too much, especially when we get down here to winter, it'll be worse. Right now, it's been dry. They'll clean some of that up, but even as dry as it's been, as much as they can clean up, they still waste a ton of it. Once we get to winter, we get cold and snow and ice, then they don't get to clean any of it up. So, all right, guys, that's probably about all I got right now. Let's see what happens. If anything earth-shattering comes up this next week, I'll bring something back. Otherwise, we might skip a week and move on to the next, because there's really not a lot going on right now. But the only thing we're seeing is stuff like this, where Stoney's following everybody around, keeping an eye on everybody, checking everybody out. But otherwise, there's just not a lot happening. So might skip a week. Anything comes up, we'll come back. But otherwise, possibly 2 weeks from now, I should have a lot better handle on did somebody get bred the first time around, or are we still working at it again? And I do know the other day, Stony bred Blackie here a couple days ago. So we do have that, maybe Cayenne. But otherwise, if there's anything big, I'll come back next week. Otherwise, I'll see you in a couple weeks.